The PharmCast is a podcast sponsored by the Maryland Pharmacists Association. I'm your host, Aaliyah Horton. I'm the Executive Director of MPHA. And in my role, I have the opportunity to meet so many fascinating people within Maryland and around the country that are engaged in the practice of pharmacy. They're stakeholders, they're innovators, collaborators, and advocates. And this is my opportunity to bring those conversations and experiences to you. And it's another way that MPHA is fulfilling its mission to strengthen the profession of pharmacy, advocate for pharmacists, and to promote excellence in pharmacy practice. My hope is that at the end of these conversations, you will leave informed, engaged, and connected to pharmacy and our Maryland pharmacy community. Welcome to the PharmCast. Today's guest is Shabbir Safdar, and Shabbir is the executive director of the Partnership for Safe Medicines. And so he's been there for well over a decade and has been leading it since 2017. He is very passionate, I know this firsthand, he's very passionate about patient safety and the dangers of counterfeit medications, having seen the firsthand dangers of counterfeits in countries around the world. Where a closed, secure drug supply chain doesn't exist like what we have here. So Shabbir, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
So MPHA has been a member of Partnership for Safe Medicines, or PSM, for many years, and I've had the opportunity to participate with you in several different advocacy efforts. You've done presentations for us, and we've done meetings on Capitol Hill to really raise awareness about medication safety and the safety of the pipeline. And so I've learned so much from you, and I've really enjoyed these experiences. But one of the things I have to say, and I wanted to talk to you because you always have some new information to share, and every time we talk and I'm around people that haven't heard your presentations or the information that you're sharing, people are shocked. And I'm always shocked about the new information that you have to share. And so let's just get into it. Go ahead and tell us what Partnership for Safe Medicines does, and we can get into some of the things that are going on right now.
So we study, and when I say study, I mean we read trial transcripts and indictments and talk to victims about counterfeit crime in America. And it is work that is at times upsetting and scary, but it is also work that is incredibly important, and we feel privileged to do it. And so as an example, just today, this morning, I was emailing with a woman whose daughter was killed by a fake pill made with fentanyl. And the killer, the head of the drug ring, is on trial in Colorado. And she was talking about how the killer's drug ring had killed enough people that the prosecutors had got the opportunity to go shopping for the perfect victim. And her daughter was not it. And she was pretty upset about that because her daughter had both alcohol and fentanyl in her system from the fake pill. And they were afraid that the defense attorney would try and blame the alcohol for her death as opposed to the fake pill, which is just one of the challenges of working in this space. You know, it's hard to prove death from a counterfeit, but awareness is a lot of what we do, and it's really important. And the people that these things actually affect are humans who have feelings and families, and so we really feel good about the work, even though it is difficult sometimes.
Yeah, and the work you do when you talk about the education, so it's not just the pharmacy professionals and working with the pharmacy community. It's members of Congress. It's the general public. It's elected leaders. It's, like you said, prosecutors, and working in the criminal justice system. We kind of met at a time when there was really a push to increase, well, I guess really allow people to purchase their medications from Canada, which are online pharmacies. And it sounded really easy. Drugs are cheaper in Canada. We should do that. Drugs are too expensive. Medications are too expensive here in the US. Can you talk about why that was so oversimplified and misunderstood? by
Sure.
public and elected officials?
Well, I mean, there's two factors here. The first of which is that Canada has an entirely different healthcare system than we do, and it's got pros and cons. There's a lot of things about it I like, and the thing that most people like about it is that there's medicines that are cheaper. The things that are not so great is that those price controls come with issues of access to availability of first-rate medicines, and we don't ever think about that. But the Canadian drug supply is much smaller than we think. They buy about 2% of the world's medicines, and America buys 40%, and they have 1/9 the population. And so the idea is that we go to Canada and get our medicines are great until you do the math on how big their supply is, and you realize that they would have widespread shortages in 6 months if even only 1 in 5 Americans fill their prescription from Canada. And the Canadians know that, and so they've banned mass exports as a result.
Okay. Well, that part, I learn something new every time I talk to you, because I know when we were having those conversations, there was also information that, yeah, they didn't want Americans buying their medications. And then also, when people think that they're buying their medications from Canada, they're not.
That's right. And so if you look at some of these websites that have a Canadian flag graphic on them, the fine print says they get their medicines from Canada, Turkey, India, China, and odds are good that they're never coming from Canada. The Canadians take a very dim view of people actually selling out of the Canadian supply online. And so what these businesses have done is they domicile themselves in Canada and they ship direct from warehouses overseas. So your package actually comes from China or Turkey or India.
Okay.
It doesn't actually come from a Canadian warehouse. And if they did, they would probably get some visits from the Canadian Mounties.
Okay.
The other thing is that they cover their tracks by buying an export-only pharmacy license. And that's not the same as a bricks and mortar pharmacy license in Canada, but there's a couple of provinces that are a little lax about selling export-only mail order licenses. And if you look at the fine print on the Board of Pharmacy in Manitoba, for example, they say we don't take complaints from Americans. And so I was just talking to seniors on Monday, and she said, I buy these eye drops that are very expensive from this Canadian pharmacy. And I said, first of all, I bet it's not in Canada. I bet it's not a pharmacy, but if you look closely at their license, the regulator says we don't take complaints from Americans. And the reason is because they can't. They don't have to. Right? They get their $400 a year from the mail order business and they're happy, but it wouldn't make any sense for them to try and adjudicate international complaints. So there's really no one regulating that web pharmacy you're buying from unless it's got a Maryland Board of Pharmacy license.
Right. And even that, when you say that, they're shipping directly from these other countries, and they're not following the same safety protocols. So I don't want to cast aspersions on the rest of the world, but when we're talking about the security and the safety and the integrity of what we want to believe is the drug safety pipeline for when we're getting medications from the pharmacy or wherever, there's an expectation that the FDA has approved the process and that there are a whole series of steps that protect us.
Yeah.
It's not there.
It's not there. And the world is full of counterfeit factories. This is what we've learned during the pandemic. If all of the people making 3M masks were actually 3M manufacturers, we would have had them the world over. But I think, as you know, in Maryland, because you had some personal experience with it, the world is full of fake manufacturers of 3M masks. And that's really one of the big dangers. Is people will say, oh, well, my drugs already are made in China. So if I buy from mail order from China, it must be safe. It's like, no, that's not how it works. There's
right.
0.1% of the factories in China are actually FDA inspected, and you don't know that you're getting one of those. And so if you just say, oh, it came from China and they make other drugs, it must be safe, that's a fallacy.
Yeah, it always makes you pause. Like I said, I'm usually scared out of my wits sometimes after I get done talking with you, because you really have to be careful about everything. And I was just on a call with some folks about vaccines, and the interesting thing that we're running into now, which there aren't any examples yet. With, at least let me say this, in the conversation that we had, we were talking about the potential problems. So you have all of these mass vaccination sites, And the CDC has recommended that those vials be put in the sharps containers, which are the biohazard safe, and people can't get into them and everything, but they take up so much space. And apparently there's a little bit of a shortage. They're just dumping them. And there is a concern that people are going to go around and collect those and just put saline or something else in them and try to sell them as fake vaccines. And also they're talking about making sure that the boxes that they come in are properly destroyed with lot numbers and the barcodes and everything, because there's a concern about counterfeiting there. So have you heard examples of that yet? This was kind of like, let's mitigate this, but have you seen it?
Absolutely. And this is actually where one of the reasons I love working with pharmacists is that they actually have the ability to make a huge impact on safety. So as an example, the podcast listeners can't see it, but I'm holding up to the screen an actual Moderna empty vial and an actual Pfizer vaccine empty vial. I bought them on eBay.
Oh.
And to date,
and Aaliyah just dropped out of the screen.
To date, we have not found, law enforcement's looking very carefully because they have been on this since the start of the pandemic. They have not found anyone taking these vials, filling them, and then distributing in the US. But we believe that they're probably making a lot of money doing it either on the dark web and for outside the US where demand for vaccine is high and supply is low. So the idea that you destroy these or destroy them as bio-waste is really important and will help stem that problem. Eventually, they can make their own glass vials and their own fake labels. And with some work, get a vial capping machine. But let's not make it easier for the criminals to do that kind of thing.
And I always have that. This is also sort of a gut check when I talk to you, because in my naivete, when the person started talking about that, my immediate thought was, oh, well, this is like a pandemic. This is an unprecedented situation. Maybe people are buying them off of Amazon just to say, as like a memento, not even thinking of like this huge other issue. So
yeah, well, it's funny. All through the pandemic, it's really been amazing to see. You've seen the whole healthcare system, including law enforcement, which is a part of the regulatory enforcement of the healthcare system, really step up. And so the counterfeiters have stepped up as well. They have pivoted. We watched financial scams around detection and things like treatments like fake remdesivir pivot the minute vaccines were plentiful throughout a lot of the US to vaccine-related financial scams. So now we're seeing people get telemarketing, email, and text message calls saying, did you get vaccinated? I'm from Pfizer, and here is a survey that if you answer and pay for shipping, I'll send you a free iPad. And of course, that's completely fake. Pfizer's not doing a post-vaccination survey, and they're not giving away iPads. But of course, in the process, you're going to release your name, your date of birth, other personal health information, possibly your healthcare number with your insurance provider, and then you're going to pay them for the iPad, none of which is going to come to anything. So the criminals are really adaptable, and they're moving weekly to whatever seems most believable, and they're making money at it.
This is just insane. I don't even know what to say, Shabbir. Okay. So let me just reel it back now. So what can we do? What can the pharmacy community do? I think on one hand, I think that, the way pharmacists, in the hospital settings, in the communities, kind of retail settings, there are very strict standards for how they get certain things. So I don't think they're going to really get caught up in these fakes, but I think our community has an opportunity to speak to individuals and to educate them. So what can the pharmacy community do to help in education and awareness?
Well, let's start with what pharmacy has done correctly in this area for so long, because it's easy when you do something right for a long time to make it look easy, to make it look like it's no effort. But pharmacists in the over the decade I've been studying these crimes almost never make the mistake of buying from an unlicensed wholesaler. And so that's a big one. And it's easier in a hospital or an institutional setting because you've got a compliance department and you've got purchasing standards. But for community pharmacists, I bet sometimes they're offered through things like MatchRx or through blast faxers deals, and they don't take them. It's
Hmm.
kind of amazing. If you look at the history of counterfeits in this country, we've had people selling cancer medications to hundreds of outlets to get them through to patients, but it wasn't pharmacists in almost 1,000 instances of that. So that's what they're doing right. And so they should keep doing it because they've got that one down. And the place that pharmacists play a role, I think, is right now immediately is in these vaccine vials, right? That's an easy one. But also in education, right? There are patients all the time who are going to ask a pharmacist for about anything from, um, you know, what's a reasonable treatment to what do I, where can I get good masks, right? These are all kinds of medical topics that are going to come up. And I think those are all important ones. And the ones I think pharmacists might get asked the most that seems a little out of their lane, but is not, is about supplements. The National Association of Boards of Pharmacy just did a great publication on the danger and the poor regulation in the supplement industry and how supplements are often filled with actual real drugs, even though they're labeled as herbal or natural. And pharmacists have a role to be able to say, actually, these things are important. The regulation is not as good as these medicines that I dispense. You got to be careful where you get them. Don't buy them on Amazon. It's best to buy them in some place that has a pharmacy license because we're more careful than anyone else about where we buy things that you put in your body.
Right.
I think those are things that pharmacists can do before, during, and after the pandemic to keep us all healthy and safe.
Yeah, and I'm all about USP. I
Mm-hmm.
know that the pharmacists have some concerns about some of the guidelines that come out, but when you're looking at least on the nutraceuticals and the supplements, I know to look for that USP stamp of approval,
Mm-hmm.
for sure.
Yeah, and it's really important. I mean, the things we put in our body have a severe impact on our health, and it doesn't take much to be harmful. And whether it's malicious or negligent, the FDA, when they do their inspections, does them for a reason, and we should respect that.
Mhm. Um, Circling back to what you started mentioning about the fentanyl piece, and this is just something that I honestly have not had time to really research, but I just want to have a better understanding. So fentanyl is a um, manufactured opioid. Is that
Mm-hmm.
correct?
It's a synthetic opioid.
Synthetic
Yep.
opioid. Okay. Now, it's fentanyl. Fentanyl is actually used in legitimate medical practice, right?
Right. So there's medical grade fentanyl, which you'll
Okay.
find both in patches and then also administered in the operating room. I just actually had a adult procedure that involved a little bit of fentanyl.
Mhm.
So there are medical uses for it.
Okay. And it's really to knock you out, though, right?
I think so, but I'm actually not a pharmacist.
Okay, right. Okay, I forgot about that because I've been wanting to ask these questions. Okay, I know that we have heard with the issue with fentanyl. So it's a synthetic opioid, and then people are making fake fentanyl.
So what's happening is that fentanyl is very, very potent in small doses.
Right.
One to 2 milligrams is what will give you physical effects. 2 milligrams or more is what will kill you. So if you imagine how small 1 to 2 milligrams is, it's a hand. It's not even a handful. It's a finger full of grains.
Mm-hmm.
And so a kilo of fentanyl only costs about $4,000 on the black market or one of the fentanyl analogs.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you think about a kilo, its street value when you make it into pills is about $1 million. So the concept that you can take a $4,000 purchase and turn it into $1 million of revenue is why there is a big fentanyl crime wave that's been going on for 6 years now.
Okay. Okay. That makes more sense because I couldn't really understand. Like you just keep hearing about these fentanyl deaths, and I don't want to underscore opioid misuse and abuse, but we do know of people who are on opioids that are functioning opioid are addicted to opioids and function on them for 20 years. But you're hearing more and more about this fentanyl. I take it, and they're just out of there. And I now see what you're saying with the um, the draw for that type of money. And if a few people fall out, then, I've still made all of this money. So that I wasn't quite understanding, like, what's the benefit there if you're killing people? It's
Well, it's
different
even
than
worse. I mean,
bringing people out for years, you
well, yeah,
know?
one of the things that I've learned that is tragic in talking to narcotics detectives is that killing your customers is actually not a bad thing. If you sell these fake pills made with fentanyl, if you sell like a fake M30 that's made with fentanyl and not the actual ingredient, because when you are selling pills on the street or when you're buying pills on the street and you're an addict, your system has upregulated and the same amount of medicine, the same amount of active ingredient doesn't have the same effect anymore, which means that you're going to go into withdrawal. And for anybody who's got any experience with withdrawal, it is the worst feeling in the world. You will do anything to avoid it. So you're always seeking a good value for your dollar to make sure that you're not going into withdrawal. And what happens is that if there is news of people overdosing on a pill that's on the street, people who typically don't respond to a normal dose will go seeking it because they know that that will actually keep the withdrawal at bay and satisfy their cravings. And that's how you end up with what police refer to as mass casualty events
Right.
from a bunch of fake pills that all have too much fentanyl in them, is that all the addicts get drawn into wherever the people are dying from the overdose.
Okay. Wow. Okay. So what's going on? So we've talked a little bit about the pandemic and fentanyl. Um, what else is going on? So, like, what I know, typically you travel all over the country. Um, so what's on your program for the next couple of months, and what are you focused on in particular?
So we're about to release a new report
Oh,
on pill presses. It's going to come out probably in the next 3 weeks. And we did one 2 years ago in 2019 where we talked about how no one was really focusing on the fact that there is a proliferation of illegal pill presses because you can buy a pill press for, let's say, $1,000 online from Alibaba, and then you can buy a Xanax mold, which is entirely illegal for anyone to sell and for you to buy and possess. A Xanax mold that lets you make fake Xanax pills. And people do that and put fentanyl in them. And people like Tosh Ackerman in my photo behind me
yeah.
have died from them. And those pill presses have not gone away. People are still smuggling them into the country. People are still making fake pills. And what we're learning is that they're taking out the Xanax molds and putting in other molds for other pills that are popular to diversify where they can sell their criminal products. And so what we've seen lately is a real spike in Adderall pills made not with fentanyl, but with methamphetamine.
Mhm.
Methamphetamine is also a stimulant, and so it's going to have probably a similar effect, but obviously it's addictive.
Right.
Adderall is addictive too, but you don't really want to. You don't medically get methamphetamine. It's not part of a therapeutic regimen for
Right.
most people, and it's particularly dangerous because the community that uses Adderall quite a bit is the sort of 16 to 24-year-old high school college set.
Mhm.
And if you remember what it was like to be that age, you don't have a well-developed frontal lobe for risk.
They don't know
And
that though.
no, they are relatively
Yeah.
indestructible, but not entirely
Right.
indestructible. And that community actually has a habit of trading those pills. If you talk to anybody in that age group and say, do you know people who have an Adderall prescription who swap it with their friends who maybe need to study? If they're truthful with you, they'll tell you yes.
Yeah.
And that's a real dangerous scenario. Whenever you get counterfeits in a community that's not careful for getting their medicine from pharmacists, that's how you end up with harm, patient harm. And so that's what we're seeing a rise of. People are swapping out their Xanax and M30 molds and putting in Adderall molds. And it's really dangerous. We've seen it in many, many states.
I know that's really important for parents to hear, um, for kids that may actually have that prescription, and to make sure that they're securing their own supply, and that their children are not engaging in that practice. And I can imagine that even though they're not, um, interacting as much because everybody's been in quarantine more or less. I could see how the added stress of constant online learning and Zoom, as you know, because a lot of us are Zoom, we're on it now, but a lot of us are zoomed out. um, I could see how that could be triggering for people to try something new or different. And I recall, I don't remember her name at the moment, but she's a well-known psychiatrist or a psychologist in Los Angeles. She's done a lot of TV shows and everything. But her son ordered, I think it was Adderall, or ordered something just on an app and had it delivered to his house. And he died like the next day. I think his may have been laced with fentanyl or something was in there that did not agree with him.
He did. And there's another one here in Sacramento. I live in California, and in Sacramento, there's a family who is in lockdown, and their high school son bought a pill off Snapchat, and it had too much fentanyl, and he died. And these drug dealers are operating on social media now, on Snapchat and Instagram and advertising. And there's a lot of parents whose kids have died that way who don't think that those platforms are doing enough to screen, because it shouldn't be hard to find someone advertising Xanax.
Yeah, that doesn't pop up on my feed.
If you start looking for it, the algorithm will show you more of them. Yeah, it's quite upsetting, because you see a lot of parents whose first exposure to Snapchat is discovering that their child was harmed by it, and then wondering why they'd never heard of it and why they're hearing about it only now. So that's part of the awareness raising we try and do.
That's incredible. Well, I'm glad to have heard this. I've got some people to go talk to.
Some teenagers.
Yes, I come from a big family on both sides. We have a whole generation. There's probably, I don't know, 30, 40 kids from 10 to 19 that really need to hear this. You know, and as parents, we talk to our kids, but we talk to them from a perspective that we know and from experiences that we've had. And, you know, the 90s, very different than 2020, 2021. Yeah. And so this is as...
Sorry, oops. I'm still not sure about
that. You're interviewing me and Siri, aren't you?
Siri heard me say that 2020 was different than 2021, and she said she's not sure about that. I agree.
Well, you know, to help you in the conversation, I'm not an expert at speaking to teenagers, as my 15-year-old will tell you that I don't know what I'm talking about. But I would suspect that being Aunt Aaliyah and not Mom Aaliyah will help. Okay. And then to the extent that it's useful, on our website, if you look under patients or public policy, I'm not sure which it's under at the moment, but we have a whole tab of stories called Real Victims of Fake Drugs.
Okay.
And we've got photos of people of all ages, be they 16 or 20 or 35, who have died from these fake pills. And maybe that person's story will help set the conversation to say, you know, I'm not imagining things. There's actual people who've been harmed.
Right.
You know, I will fix anything you want, but I can't fix this. So maybe avoid that for me.
Exactly. Well, thank you. And we'll be sure to link to those resources in the episode description. So I typically close out by asking folks what they do what do you do to take care of yourself? How do you maintain your balance? Because I know I've referenced it a couple of times, how much you travel and you're all over the country and speaking and engaging with actually the world, really. So what do you do to kind of keep it even keeled or as best you can?
Well, it's interesting. A lot of people are coming out of the pandemic, different people than they went in, and I don't think I'll travel as much afterwards. Okay. I've really enjoyed this time at home, and my family actually needed me, and we had some things we navigated together that were really important. To relax, I play music, which has been challenging during the pandemic with other people. But I have some folks that we stand 8 feet apart every other weekend and play music together. So that's been really nice.
What do you play?
I play upright bass and electric bass,
Okay.
and I play a lot of bluegrass. But lately, the person I play with likes to play classic rock, and that's
Okay.
my age demographic.
Awesome. See, I learned something new. That's cool.
Yeah, and video games with my kids and board games. That's been the new thing during the pandemic, as we've burned through all of our board games, and actually, it's been really fun.
I've been really trying with the board games, and I have this one that I'm really upset with everybody in my house right now. I don't know if we may be around the same age, but do you remember the game called Life?
Oh yeah.
I grew up playing that, and no one will play with me. I got a whole new game. I've had this game for like 8 months now. No one will play.
I know it dates me, but you and I both remember that Life that they sell now is not the same as the Life that we had when we were kids.
I haven't opened it because I haven't gotten any, so I need to open it and look at it. But I'm sure a lot of the cards and different things that happen are different. But we played that game all the time, and I haven't cracked the seal on the game.
Yeah, my family's board game growing up was Monopoly, and it was obviously, as in most families, the place where bitter fights happened.
Yeah, ours was Trivial Pursuit. That was the one where it got very ugly. How Trivial Pursuit gets ugly, I don't know, but
family dynamics could make tic-tac-toe ugly.
Yes, there were usually allegations of cheating because people would steal the boxes and study the cards, and so it was very competitive. Well, that's for another episode.
Yes.
But Shabbir, thank you so much for spending time with me today. Shabbir and Partnership for Safe Medicines are on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. And like I said, we'll post all that information in the session description, but be sure to follow them. They have great information and resources. It'll scare you, but it'll scare you straight, as they say. And I hope that with all the information that we learn, we try to get it out, but as our listeners hear this, that they will take that in and share it with their community. And if you have any closing words, Shabbir?
Well, just please like and subscribe the Maryland Pharmacists YouTube channel and the Partnership for Safe Medicines YouTube channel.
Thank you. And he was not paid for that plug. Thanks, Shabbir.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. And please be sure to like, subscribe, and rate the podcast on all major podcast platforms. We look forward to dropping more great conversations. And of course, sponsorship opportunities are available. Just contact us at MPHA. Thanks.